today the plan is to work on an H. The letter H. Today is brought to you by the letter H. This guy. Hello, Sylvina. So sketching out sort of direction. The last one went up and then twisted around. These are going to be two that are kind of similar. I think it'll be the exaggeration of either. I could make this a pretty thin guy. What I'm thinking is I have a figure. Oh, I never make a smile. Rolling slightly, so then it is displaced a little bit to a side and is this direction. And then having it spread out. So then I have it like this guy. And then I could either have it go down this direction and lift up, but I think it might ultimately be more interesting to have it sort of go like this, or it would have to actually be more like this. If I do it quickly, I can get away with it. I think the most interesting thing might be with this way, then one side pops down, lifting this up like this, and then the other side pops up, and you got this, and then both of them twist around the backside. Probably in the same direction. So what you end up with is an H, something like that. I think that might be the most interesting means about it. And then could have it, then have this guy, this central guy, move down. So it create a U as it goes around. And then it sort of shrinks back towards this direction. No, I think it should go back. Okay, I think that it actually is going to go this edge leading down, following this pathway, and then you have this guy, and then it just drops down. So I think that's my plan. Okay, hello 0.5 SPX. Have I had something to eat today? I had a smoothie and a peanut butter sandwich and part of a Twix bar, but I did eat today. So if this is going this way, it's going to end up, at first it has to roll and then spread out. So it's going to be midway, sort of. So it'll actually end up being that like and a little offset here. This needs to maintain here. At least this height. I have part of the song Peg stuck in my head by Steely Dan, but only the part that's sampled. By I Know, by De La Soul, which might have been my first introduction to Steely Dan, I'm not sure. So here's the H, the planned H. Keep playing that slide underneath. I don't listen to music when I work for Instagram Live because it would kick me off and I couldn't then upload the saved file to YouTube. Favorite artists in general, ones that mean a lot to me are white nerdy art things. Not exclude, like you don't have to be in that thing, but stereotypical for people who are sort of like me. Talking Heads is a big one. I could go through like different sort of stages. They Might Be Giants is probably the group that I've liked for the longest, because it's accessible when you're a bit younger to listen to They Might Be Giants. It's not as, like, it's jokey at times, and they even have some kids albums nowadays, but it's never quite as alienating or as harsh as some other stuff. I'll just sort of try and think through what my experiences were. In high school, I probably would have said Pixies. Pixies are a very good high school band to get into. Like, I still enjoy them, but like, as far as just expending energy and pushing your boundaries, figuring out your limits and comfort areas, Pixies are good for that. I never got into Bright Eyes. High school is when I first really got into hip-hop stuff, and sort of entry points for that were the Grey album, which was DJ Danger Mouse sampling songs from Beatles' White Album, and setting it to, or then having the vocals from Jay-Z's Black Album. That, along with Beatles are a good group. Don't know if you heard about it. What else was I into at that time? All the stuff from, there was a bunch of stuff that came out through Adult Swim. Hello, Sajal. I'm gonna get this to a better cropping. Let's get even closer on that bad boy. Oh, wrong way. Let's try that here. Should be good. Actually, let's move this up. Right about yonder. Probably good. Okay. I got really into Stone's Throw record stuff. Oh, I see one of you guys, Quasimodo, as your icon. That was through a lot of Adult Swim stuff. So I liked watching stuff like Boondocks and Space Ghost, odds and ends of various things. And Adult Swim had... How is this going? Adult Swim had an album with DJ Danger Mouse and MF Doom, Danger Doom, and I was real into that because there was an access point. It was this thing that I enjoyed, and it had connections to it. So Mad Villain did some songs, or had some songs featured on an episode of the Boondocks, and I was like, I like this. Oh, here's the guy that is associated with this guy, and I like that guy, and sort of going here and there and just getting different associations and groups and such. This is going here. I could make it go harsher around, then make it come back on this weird edge. I'm figuring out what this is going to look like. It's a little bit awkward at this stage. But Danger Mouse was a real entry point. And then you also had stuff like Gnarls Barkley with CeeLo was getting a lot of just play and stuff everywhere. And I was like, I know that guy from this thing. And then CeeLo being in that was something of an access point or reference point for stuff like Goody Mob. I slowly got more into Outkast, but I sort of went from alternative hip hop and made my way towards mainstream. So it went from like more stuff like MF Doom, Danger Mouse, Danger Doom, all those things. It sort of went from that to then eventually stuff like Biggie. Like I started with the more alternative stuff, and slowly made my way to liking and enjoying things that were more mainstream. I got more into Wu-Tang before Biggie, and it's because I learned to like it thinking of it as like a DIY sort of bit, because it was pretty bare bones using what bits they had for a while, and like if you're good you're good, if you're bad you're bad sort of stuff. For like who got to rap on whatever track and things like that. This is gonna confuse me as I'm working on it, but it's an interesting shape. So I'm gonna do just a straight up outline version of this and refine some bits. Excuse me. But for like rock stuff in high school, I started getting into older rock stuff. Recently, Rolling Stone magazine did an updated version of their 500 greatest songs of all time, or 500 greatest albums of all time. And in high school, I used that as a reference point to be like, how do I find out about all this older music? And the answer was go through and try and find stuff from that. And so that's when I started listening to things like Buddy Holly and more James Brown, Sly and the Family Stone, Richie Valens, more Bob Dylan, more different Beatles albums from what we had when I was growing up, what my sister had made purchase of. And then just a bunch of stuff on Stone's Throw Records. Def Jux, that's how I first heard LP. Mad Villain, or not, well, around that time was Mad Villain, but Mad Lib, Aesop Rock, which isn't as much my favorite as it used to be. And then there was a lot of stuff that I didn't realize how of that time it was, production-wise. There's a lot of stuff that when I've gone back and listened to it, I'm like, oh, this sounds very much like it was 2008 or so. Stuff like Cunning Linguists, some bits of Black Alicious. Depends what song and what album you're listening to. Perceptionists, Brother Ali. This will be much easier if I have this reverse back that way, as opposed to this weird bit. Okay. Just so this, I want to see what this generally looks like if I fill in the solids. This is going to be slow moving as I move towards this one. This one might take a minute longer than I think it will. This might be closer to 4 hours as opposed to 3. Recent years I've been listening to a lot of Mitski and Fiona Apple. Sort of because of working on stuff, but I had a different sort of working on the video for her. It was a different sort of catalyst moving towards listening to her music more more purposefully, more intently. That's what I was trying to think of. I really like Townes Van Zandt. I don't listen to all that much country western music, but Townes Van Zandt is one that I listen to a lot. I think because it's pretty bare bones. One thing that bothers me for a lot of pop music and country western sort of music, pop country, is that it's like hyper clean in its production. It sounds very expensive, but not as personable. In high school, I also really got into the Beach Boys, specifically Pet Sounds, That was one of the like best albums of all time sort of deal. And it is a very, very good album. But you also have I really like the Kinks. They're a very good group. Interesting trajectory. Kept working on stuff forever. In college, I listened to a lot of noisier sort of stuff, but like noise pop. I like stuff that sounded like it came out of a garage or something similar. I also got into a lot more. Hey, Dylan. Got into a lot more like earlier hip hop stuff in college. More things that like Africa Bambaataa, stuff that was more electronica, things that had closer roots to techno stuff and various house music and things. Things where like there is nerdy dudes super into craft work who were like, let's make a danceable record or a more danceable record. So you got nerds like Grandmaster Flash coming through. He was just a like music engineer nerd. Stuff like Mantronics, Treacherous 3, Cool Mo D. A little bit later in the history of it, you had stuff like Big Daddy Kane. I got very into different sort of sampling albums. So in high school, I was very much into DJ Shadow's introducing. Tried to get into avalanches, but it wasn't as interesting to me. It wasn't quite the same. Introducing felt like it had to be made that way. And that it added to it, and Avalanche's album sounded more like, let's try to make it this way. It's interesting seeing what I hold on to, or what just people in general hold on to as far as music that they have listened to in the past and what remains significant or important. Stuff that fell off in my listening was more sort of self-righteous hip-hop. It was an important thing to have those access points for me, because I was pretty self-righteous at the time. Stuff like Sage Francis and Aesop Rock, where it's technically proficient and well done, but it doesn't have the same feeling it's not quite as vulnerable or aggressive, which is a weird sort of thing. Or like I don't know, it's a weird sort of bit to it where it's like can be very vulnerable, but it's very self-aware at the same time, so it's not, it's like a very polished vulnerability. Hello, heart tiles. Here, teals. Herschels? I'm not sure. I think maybe the difference between like what I feel as being intentionally very vulnerable or like just actually vulnerable is a willingness to come across as being a bad person, which is very either like knee-jerk sort of thing that you have to do, or you have to be very aware and vulnerable. Hello, Artemianiamus. I got very much into the song "What's Up, Fat Lip." There's a like short documentary thing about it, about him making that video with Spike Jonze. I watched that a bunch of times. Shared it with various folks. I don't know if you're still watching, but I was talking with someone earlier about trying to figure out the most surprising sample. And it's for just music in general, like the most surprising use of a sample. And started because I saw a tweet where someone was talking about like choir that was used for Wycliffe song, and it's like out of left field, but it's also like obscure in a way that's not totally surprising. And I was trying to figure out what makes a surprising sample. And it really depends on what your sort of musical awareness is for different musicians and such. But also like what you think is a weird sample or something odd, or one that hits you by surprise. And one of the suggestions was Kanye sampling Steely Dan for Champion. And in my mind, I was like, it is a sort of odd choice, but it's also one that there's a precedent in hip-hop that was a precursor to that, of sampling Steely Dan for a song, and that's I Know by De La Soul, and that's why I've been humming or whistling that da na 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 da na 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 na. Big. I know I love you better. Do 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 do. Also, not exactly the same, but in the same general vein, you got the one for what is it? I can't think of the name. Regulators, sampling Michael McDonald. I keep forgetting not in love anymore. Forgetting things will never be the same again. Do 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 do. It's cool right now. Do do. Hello, I got your email, Eileen. But I have not had a chance to go over it yet. Try to get at it soon. The easiest thing is probably some print fulfillment service. X is going to be annoying. K is going to be annoying. Q will be a little bit awkward, maybe. Any that have, like, a return over the motion. And because K is a little... H is a little bit awkward, as is. This is H currently. This is sort of what it's eventually going to be looking like. Or, that's what I'm backtracking on. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Every time that I say I'm doing a letter, I doubt that I know how to go through the alphabet. I'm always going to be like, I don't think that's what it actually is. Hello, AP auxiliary execute. Thanks, Luigi. That first has got Luigi going on. Purge. Okay. I confused myself. see how on or off I am with this bit. A bit off. That's okay. Hello, Austin Storm. They got their eyes closed. I don't know. Part of that is me just sort of feeling a freedom and letting things happen in the space around. I like to think of them being calmly adaptive. Sometimes I think about them like there's a sequence in a movie Kung Fu Hustle where there's a guy who sort of fights the people around him by just moving and being adaptive, and instead of like, it's one of those things of like the best offense be a good defense or something, however you want to phrase it. The best defense is a good offense, depends on who you are, but that it's like more frustrating to fight someone who just doesn't let you hit them than it is to fight someone who is like punching back. This is Ink. It's Sumi Ink. S-U-M-I Ink. And the brand is Yasutomo. I have various Spotify playlists. I just don't post about them. But if you want to find my Spotify public playlists, you can search for Can I Kicked It, all one word, and that's my username. CANIKICKEDID. And I have some public playlists there that have some themes in different ways. Can I kicked it? Yep. It's not can I kick it, it's can I kicked it. Just a Tribe Called Quest reference. From the song Can I Kick It? Yes, you can. Can I kick it? Yes, you can. Can I kick it? Yes, you can. Well, I'm gone. Gone. Can I kick it? To the tribe that flows in layers. Life is safe. Effect is a really fair. Mr. Digger, would you please be my mayor? You'd be doing us a really big favor. Boy, this track really has a lot of flavor. It's a different rhyme scheme. Because it's like just a little bit of, like, it's not the same sound at the end, but it's similar. So it's like a B, 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 C, B. It's not a traditional rhyme scheme. And that samples the intro bass line from Lou Reed's Walk on the Wild Side. Boom, 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 boom. I don't know if that song's on either of those, are on either. Any playlists that I have that are public playlists. Ooh. Which one are you listening to? One of those songs, or listening to one of my playlists, or what? I forget what playlist I have public. The last playlist I started making, but I haven't updated. The bridge one, that's a lot of... I started that playlist with the song from Orange Juice, which is a post-punk band that I think is out of... that they were from England. Or maybe they're Scottish. I forget. They might be offended if I said one or the other. Can I Kick It? Then your playlist. Can I Kick It's a good song. Bridge starts off with the sort of grossly titled Come On Feel the Noise by Slade, which you might recognize. I think that's how that playlist starts. But the premise of that playlist was like transitional stuff that went from like 70s glam rock to punk and post-punk and new wave. Because there's a lot of like similar sort of bits to all of those. I'm just going to look at what's on that playlist now. Bridge. So it starts off with Slade, then you have the Ramones, which is punk, but that one has a little bit more of a transitional bit because it's referencing like 60s pop sort of stuff in the come on, let's dance. It sounds almost like Buddy Holly or something. Or like do the hey Zenshi. Hope you're doing well. Forget if you were studying last night or drawing or what, but hope it went well. What else is on there? Gang of Four, Contract. That's a Gang of Four is an interesting band because it's like punk rock that's got a really strong rhythm and bass to it. That's almost disco in style. It's like danceable punk, which you have some of that later on, but more like dance music punk. Riot Girl related things, stuff like La Tigre. It has some roots in that, but it's that playlist of Bridge is meant to have music that is either interstitial between stuff. Gang of Four is very good. Hope that your work stuff goes well. I'm guessing you were going to catch you at another time, but if you want to watch any of these at your own leisure, I upload them to YouTube after live broadcasting. So you can watch them there if you'd like. It says 01. Okay. Now we're going the opposite direction. Let's number these all. 2. 03. 04. 05. 06. 07. 08. 09, that might stick. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Okay. These here, and let's go the other direction. So first I'm gonna make this settle for half a second by tracing this one as best I can. Thank you, Arteminianus. What else is on that? The Beat, Elvis Costello and the Attractions is on that playlist. I really like that album, this year's model. It's really impressive keyboard or electric organ stuff, and then the bass is constant. And it's something that feels like it came out from the 80s, but it was the late 70s. So that's why it's on the playlist, because it's sort of bridging that style. Elvis Costello and the Attractions. This year's model. But the Beat fit more into that because it's Surrender by Cheap Trick. I just really like that song. Surrender. And that's got some sort of transitional bit from 70s, 80s stuff, and it's Elvis Costello is pretty well known. I like older stuff of his better, but that's how it tends to go with a lot of musicians. His best known song is maybe Allison. Thank you, Lauren. What else is on here? I Want to Be Committed by Sweet. That's just like, I never thought about like sugary sweet sort of glam rock stuff. Their best known is probably Ballroom Blitz. Or Fox on the Run. Sell the H. You can buy it on a shirt. That's how I'm selling things currently. Tissues with ABCD. I don't know why specifically tissues. It's acting up. 1 second, I'll be back. I don't make sculptures. Most that I've done is some like copper etchings and stuff. I don't have the facilities to do stuff on that scale. Alright, thanks for stopping by, Zinshi, and hope you get good sleep. Thanks for saying it looks cool. Adios. Alright, let's see what else is on there. Metal Guru by T-Rex. That's a very important album. That's very good glam rock stuff. Also, if you're someone who likes Devendra Bernhardt, you'd like their earlier work when they went by Tyrannosaurus Rex. Because he's just more or less doing what they did. One thing that I forget, is his name Mark Rowland? I forget what the main dude from T-Rex, what his name is, but he would listen to blues records, but listen to them, ones that were like 45s at 70 RPMs. I forget what the standard is, but he would listen to them at a faster pace and then imitate that sort of vibrato. So like blues singers might have like a slower vibrato, like a but he would listen to it sped up and it would be like and that's how you get something like Devendra Bernhardt. But that's not what this album is from. Metal Guru was a bit later when they had money to pay for electric instruments. That's when you get stuff like Metal Guru. That's very electric in sound. Not electronic, but electric. So if you say electronic, then you think that it sounds a bit more computerish or digital. That's not the case for glam rock sort of stuff. Without a telephone, Metal Guru is a Jew. Metal Guru is a Jew. What else is on there? David Bowie, Be My Wife. He was important in bringing a lot of stylistic things to popularity. Very good at recognizing trends. So he's important for a transitional sort of person. Keep on Knocking by Death. They were like proto-punk band. Like pre-punk punk. Just like a human being is human. Not just keep on knocking. See Her Tonight by The Doomed. That's like punk stuff. Hello. Cut. Hey, Alex. How's it going, Alex? Thank you, Alex. Hello, Nagwal. Hola, Simon. Simon. Hello, Digital the Graphite. Hello, Giovanni. Hello, Shilibi. Shilibi. Hello, Simon Simone. Hello, Rosemont. Hello, Nicholas. Is 47 a prime number? I feel like it is. Hello again, Apiox Celery. Apiox Celery. Apius? Apio? I don't know. Hello, Celery. You don't need to apologize. Martino Mianos. Hello, you call it ecologist. I was trying to say you because I saw Ukraine. Hello, it's Sarah, or Sar show. It's our show. It's our show. It's our show. Is it our show? If I say it 20 times, then closer. It's a more divisible number, and that'll make for a better grid at the tail end. Okay. Frame 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 6, 7, 48, 49. I know that says 48 in the corner, but there's actually 49 because I didn't label 26 or 27, one of those two. Take one moment, eat a Twizzler, and then start to fill stuff in. It depends on what the area is and how the brushes are behaving. Smaller areas, like these noses are pretty broad, so I can paint a bit faster. Depends on the area and such, and whether or not the brush is holding the bristles together well. As to how quickly I can paint. So now it's going to slow down a little bit again because these noses aren't as wide. I also paint faster if I'm not talking as much. It's an H. Or it's making its way towards it. I have all the outlining done, but still filling stuff in. I usually don't mess up which part is black and which one is white if I'm doing a bunch of stuff. Sometimes I do, but I usually keep general track of it. And the repetition of it is helpful. This one's more complex. More likely that I'd mess it up, but I usually keep general track. And if it is something where I'm coming back to it later, what I'll do is I'll put like a little squiggle that lets me know, like, you gotta fill in this section. Which I did do in the for the Fiona Apple stuff. If you watch that process video, you'll see when it's outlining, you'll see those sort of squiggles in there sometimes. I don't usually have hand cramps. Usually if I have any sort of discomfort, aches or anything, it's shoulder. And then maybe my back is a little sore after time. And if that's the case, then I'll do some stretches or something. I'll lie flat on the floor to crack my back, and that tends to help. Also, having this raised at a slight angle, you can't really see so clearly in the overhead video, but this is raised at an angle, and doing that helped a lot. Thanks, Maria. Thank you. I'm getting I'm guessing that's Portuguese. That you that you adore the art. At what tempo? I can't quite translate based on context. Mocha pop art. How long does it usually take you? These letters average out about 3 hours, but this one is a little bit slower for filling things in and doing some outlines, so I'm guessing this one might take 3.5 to 4 hours. Just because it's a little bit more like these sections, it's harder, or it takes more time to fill in these than one that was purely forward facing or solid black, but because it's sort of thinned out sections, it takes a little bit more time. If I mess it up, then I redo it. That's about all I can do. Or I try to compensate with. Depends how big the mistake is and what the mistake is. In a moment, I might actually crack my back. Let this go dry. And crack my back. Should take all of 5 seconds. Okay. Do I listen to music while I work? Listen to music or podcasts if I'm doing work while not live streaming. But because I'm recording this with the intent to share it to YouTube and also that it's being broadcast, it would cut me off. Or just not allow me to upload stuff if I had copywritten music playing. But if I'm working by myself and I'm not streaming, I don't listen to music or podcasts. Sometimes TV, but it's got to be the right sort of thing for TV. You don't have to apologize for asking what you consider a noob question. It's the only way to learn stuff is to face the starting point of things. Also, people just ask here and there. This face sort of comes from masks and a barn owl. Barn owls have this sort of, am I in frame? Yeah. Have this sort of arcing bit that comes around here. It sort of creates a nose form. But it also exists in various masks and simplified faces in different cultures and histories. Helmets meant to protect the nose, various things, but it's just a simplified bit with that. And a lot of using this face is a means of making something identifiable, personable, and a bit more interesting than if it were to be just a shape. That's something that you can do to make people interested in things. Give it a face of some kind. Because it creates a relationship between the viewer and the thing. Because it would be an exercise that's not terribly different than this, what I am doing, if this were just to be an abstracted form, like a tube. Just a form. But giving it a face is helpful. Depends on what sort of podcast their question was. Do you have any recommendations for podcasts? I'm going to answer the question after yours quickly because that's easier. What kind of ink or paint am I using? This is Sumi ink. SUMI ink, and the brand is Yasutomo. It's a Japanese ink, but it's pretty readily available at most art stores, either in a small green bottle or one that has a red cap, sort of like this. This is what it's in. This is a slightly larger amount. And then, what was it? Thank you for saying maybe I'm mad for saying it's a recognizable face. And then what was the other thing? Do I have any recommendations for podcasts? I listen a lot to Blank Check, which is a movie podcast, but it worked well for me when I was working on music video animation because it was a podcast I had not spent time with. It has like 500 episodes or something. I would not use this ink on fabric unless you want to like generally gray it out. You should look for fabric specific inks or fabric specific paints. And also check if you do find a fabric paint, what fabric it's meant to be applied to, because not all fabrics take all inks and such. Other podcasts that I listen to Pop Culture Happy Hour, Wonderful, which is an offshoot of Mabim Bam stuff. That's with Griffin McElroy and his wife, Rachel. Good One, which is a podcast about jokes, but it's talking to comedians and who are stand-ups or have other forms of comedy that they participate in, and it's just doing like a deep dive on the process of creation and reasoning behind different elements of jokes, or like why jokes change over time, why it's this versus that, and it's comedy nerd sort of stuff, but I find it real interesting. Every now and again I come back to Comedy Bang Bang. I've been listening to that one for like 10 years, maybe? Not quite 10 years. But for a while, I listened to that one a lot more in college. Other comedy podcasts. I listened to Mabim Bam, My Brother and Me. I listen to intermittently, I'll listen to Doug Loves Movies. That one I've listened to for a long time. For the Fiona Apple video, that was like a general pitch from me. It's not the most unique approach. Just having, if it's someone singing, what do you need? You need lips. But before I actually started working on the video, I had like general contact of like availability, and it was a very slow moving process. But I listened to a lot of her music for a while after having the first inclination, and they were songs that I liked, and I liked the expressiveness of her voice for certain songs. And there's a song I didn't realize until like later that it could have been inspiration or otherwise, but there's Hot Knife and the video for that, which is pretty minimal, but I like the songs that have panning vocals because she's got a very expressive voice, and sort of imagining those performances visually coming in and fading out, or being isolated to a side, or something of that nature, because she also has a number of instances where a stronger vocal or more expressive vocal will come in. and it sort of fills the space and what that would look like as a simplified just lips or what have you. And it's easier to have those sorts of things fade in and out if it's reduced to sort of the core elements. A lot of what I like to try and do is strip things down to the minimal amount of information necessary, or like how things change a lot when they're simplified. Smaller changes and simplified objects change them much more, will affect them much more than if it's a complex scene or image or sound or something. If all you're hearing is one note, if that one note gets on or off a little bit, then it is much more noticeable than if there's one note off in a symphony. Having a thing where it's just reduced to its core elements is something that I'm interested in, and that's what you have with that video, is trying to express feelings and visuals in a simplified manner. I forget the specific quote, but there's a thing in the movie Jiro Dreams of Sushi, that documentary about the pretty unassuming location and man who creates some of the world's most revered sushi. And then it ends up being a lot about his relationship with his son and what notoriety means generation to generation. If you come from something, then it means that you have to perform better because you're expected to perform well. But towards the beginning, I talk about the idea that his dishes are very simple, and he talks about through simplicity comes purity. And I sort of hold on to that as an idea that you have a more intimate relationship with something if it's refined to a simplified form or something, where it's very direct and honest. I also get into like what my sense of honesty is, and simple things tend to be just sort of innately more honest because there's less to hide. It's also a sense of control, that if something's simplified, there's less happening, and so you have more control over the elements that are presented. Trying to think of other podcasts. I listen to Good Christian Fun because I like the people involved, and it's a different sort of perspective. Hello, Eric. It's a different perspective where it started off a little bit more focused just on some people who grew up in the evangelical church in the United States, or non-denominational, but more specifically evangelical, and what that culture is, and the pop culture that is shared with Christian pop culture sort of elements, and revisiting those and analyzing them. But then it expands a bit more where it's more not crisis of faith consistently, but talking and exploring. And the more that you're forced to meditate on something like faith, even if it's within the context of some sort of jokier bit, it forces you to really analyze and face what it is that your thoughts, ideology, and such is. But they also make like a lot of fart jokes and stuff within that same context, and I like those bits. They talk to people who have complicated relationships with organized religion, people who have very positive relationships with organized religion, and they also are just like chaotic in a lot of pop culture things, and they have a good relationship between the two hosts for exploring those sorts of spaces. What else? My podcast sort of focus shifts with time. In high school, it was a lot more this is a longer question. On the topic of control, have I always been this patient? Would feelings from my day affect my work? Does any anger ever escape onto the page? If I'm angry, I'm probably not in a good state to work on this sort of stuff. What's the other thing? Have I always been this patient? I've not always been this specific sort of patient, but I've always been pretty patient. I have something of an addictive personality in that, like, I go pretty hard whatever I'm working on, and I don't like just kind of doing something. I like investing into stuff, which works well if I can make it a constructive sort of space, but at different times in my life it's also been somewhat destructive. I don't like being angry. Because I see people lose control at different points in my life. Not terrible ways, but just ways where it made me uncomfortable, made the people around me uncomfortable, and I didn't want to have to be the person contributing to that. And I know that trying to like hide anger away is not the way to live your life, and it's not healthy to be that restrictive on things. This sort of methodology doesn't do well with anger or frustration. If I were doing that, then it would be a different project. These sorts of things. These animations can't really be a reflection of anger. Animation itself doesn't really deal well with, at least at this sort of stage of it, because it requires a lot of consistency, patience, and revisiting things. You could have more anger in stills or in reference images, but it's really hard to create a nice moving image in animation if you're really angry or something. But it might translate to a still or whatever sort of image. I'm getting closer to being done with the outlining. Hopefully my scanner doesn't mess up again like it did yesterday, but I tested it afterwards and it was working once I disconnected and reconnected my USB hub, so I think it might be an issue there at times. I think it might be if I like plug it in and it's not connected initially or something. I don't know. Or I unplug and plug something else in. I didn't call the sequence Say Her Name. Say Her Name is in reference to Breonna Taylor, a woman who was shot and killed in her home by police officers in Louisville, Kentucky earlier this year. I actually forget when she was killed, but it's to maintain awareness of those injustices in this world and the victims of police brutality, and seeking justice for them and reform to better serve the people of the United States. For turn it off and turn it on again for the scanner. It's powered by USB, so when you unplug it, it cuts the power, but I also have my camera, and my mic connected to the USB hub, so if I were to unplug it, then it would cut that out, and that's annoying to deal with midstream, and I can't reset my computer midstream without disconnecting, and it's a much easier process for uploading these files to YouTube if the recording I have of the stream is just, I'm able to take that and directly upload it, because otherwise I have to stitch together like a 4-hour video, and the render time on saving something like that is not fun, and it's so much easier to just connect them together. Where you used to draw as much now as when you were a kid or teen? I draw more now. I don't know if I'm a bit more productive, but I'm also not learning in the same way. Where at that time I would have been doing a lot more learning of the process rather than just executing what I've learned. I made a decent amount in high school is when I got a little bit more focused on creating stuff a little bit more consistently, but most of that work was digital, working in Photoshop and Illustrator a lot, and tracing over images of classmates and stuff like that, or self-portraits, selfies. And that taught me a lot of how to use Adobe tools, but also simplifying faces and recognizing that very small changes to line work can really affect what the outcome is. Question, sorry about the question, but do you have normal work is what I think you're asking. I do some odd jobs here and there now and again, not so much this year, because this year I've been staying at home, but I mostly produce work, animations and such. I've done some art handling. I was doing a bit more of that for a bit of time. But then with the COVID coming through, pandemic stuff, it wasn't advantageous. I didn't feel comfortable going into those sorts of spaces and doing labor in a shared area and the necessary public transport stuff. Advice on improving focus and omitting distraction. I don't know how to really go about those bits. I can say that I've always been pretty good at just sort of getting hyper focused on something. The main issue is admitting to myself that I need to work on something and that initial startup. But just generally the hardest part about any sort of project or any sort of discipline is consistency. If you want to do something, it's exciting at first. And finding bits of motivating. Like a lot of people are like, the hardest part is starting, but the hardest part isn't starting. The hardest part is doing it like 5 weeks into a project and it's like a shitty day, or the weather's bad, or it's rainy and you're tired and something's just, you don't feel like you want to do stuff. Those are the most difficult elements, is when it's no longer exciting. It's more just what it is. So you have to find ways to maintain engagement. Depends where you're at with learning something. Finding some sort of community or some form of accountability can be very helpful. But it depends on who you are. My stomach made some noise. Who you are and what motivates you and what your experience is when you pursue those sorts of things. Because I've seen some people talk about the fact that like telling someone that you have the intent to do something can feel like an accomplishment in and of itself, and then you don't feel as obliged to follow through with it, which I've definitely done that as well. But having some form of accountability is helpful. For me, I don't like disappointing people, especially people who I don't feel like I can explain myself to. So in this form, I don't want to disappoint the people who are watching this. It's like having a moderate relationship with someone. Because it's a lot easier to explain yourself to people who you're close to and have a sense of understanding. But when it comes to someone who you like just kind of know, at least for me, that's a ways to go about it. And over time I've learned that that's not the best way to imagine things, that the people closest to you are the ones who you can excuse yourself from obligation. Usually I have at least some sort of mental idea of something. I might sketch like loose bits here and there. Sorry, the question was, do you improv regularly on the page, or are you always starting with a plan? I don't think that I could work without some sort of plan, but the degree of planning varies. So these alphabet loops, as I've been calling them, these letter forms, I need to have the letter planned out and a general understanding, because they have to be consistent to some degree, one letter to the next, if they're going to be part of a larger piece in the end. And also it's a bit chaotic to try and figure out what the form is as I'm going forward. So it's easier and more practical, less frustrating to have the general letter form worked out and a loose idea of direction before really getting into things. Question is, do you think using more colors in your projects would make less impact, or just why don't you use a lot of colors in your art in general? It's a mix of stuff. I like black and white. Part of it comes from working before. Color's too chaotic. I don't have a sense of control with color. Also, color is expensive. Mixing colors I don't think it is. Mixing colors gets... Okay, nothing fell. I can watch it back. It's like kind of when you mix a color, you can work for like however long to get this like perfect color. But then once you've used up that color, you have to like spend a lot of time trying to revisit and redo that and figure it out, and I don't like that. Different screens have much different color spaces to them. When you're working in an art form that eventually is living pretty much exclusively in a digital space, people's experience of that artwork varies greatly based on how they're viewing it. And one of the things that affects that experience is the different color space that pretty much every different manufactured screen will have from one to the next. You can like set up the color, calibrate it all to be what you want it to be, but you can't control that when you're pushing it out to however many million different phones that exist in the world, and different laptops and computers and screens and such, and televisions and projectors and all these different things, that how they're displaying the work will affect how it's presented. And despite the fact that different monitors and phones and screens will have a variety of color and or temperature to the white balance, there's a general understanding that what you're working with is black and white, and so you sort of can go around, circumnavigate those difficulties of displaying in a digital space if it's purely black and white. May I ask why the analog mix with digital? Digitally draw, then print, then paint and scan. So this one is pretty much all analog until I scan it and make a file. It would be pretty, like, it wouldn't really work in this day and age to to display this on film exclusively or something like that. For the Fiona Apple video, it's because it's the scope and scale of it. I couldn't get away with doing all of that analog and time it out correctly and stuff like that. It would have taken, I don't know how much longer, and it would have looked worse. So instead, I did it digitally, or using a tablet. So it's still hand-drawn frame by frame, but the texture of it doesn't look good when it's purely digital. It's too perfect and imperfect at the same time. I don't like the look of it. It looks bad to me. But I needed that base, that like starting point. Because I tried doing that video starting like purely in a digital or purely analog space and scanning it, but that guy. Sorry. I'm doing and scan. I wanted the texture and the feeling of the paper and something to be a direct one-for-one of what you're seeing, what you're viewing is what it is. And so that's why I took that process. Makes it unique, and it makes it mine as well. What about your main subject? Just how you come up with it? It's based off of masks, the simplified ways that people create graphic interpretations of faces throughout history in different cultures, and barn owls. I like barn owls. It's an easy way, having these sorts of faces that can be pushed into different shapes and forms to create an interesting visual that can be abstracted and change shape and form and position while maintaining interest from an audience and from myself. Having something as simple as that nose and the bridge and the understood protrusion of it is enough to really describe volume of abstracted shape in a graphic manner. It's having something of an invitation to enjoy and relate to an abstracted form. Where if this were just a shape, the appeal wouldn't be as prevalent. Or do my physical creations end up living once they are released online? I have a bunch of folders that have some loose descriptions of what animations are and dates and such, so they just live in those folders. It's not the easiest thing to display with the number of them, and that they are more... It's like if you were to store a film or something, like a reel of film, it doesn't really make sense to display the film itself. You can have different elements of it, but if you were just to have like 35mm film, the full entire bit of it is more storage to preserve a legacy of it, that it might be revisited someday, or used to display in the means that it's intended to. Hello, Free KZ. Thanks for watching. It would be a more boring thing if I wasn't answering and you weren't watching and asking questions, so thanks for participating. Ran out of battery. My phone's always plugged in when I'm doing these. It might kill the battery lifespan, but right now I don't need a super long battery life because I'm not going out and doing stuff. I'm at home. Hello from Ireland. Got another for you. What program do I use for putting the scans together? What's that process look like? So for scanning, I'm just running off of a MacBook. I'm just using image capture, and I know that you can run out of. Sorry, I didn't mean to imply you were doing whatever, but for wasting things, sure. That's just me. There. Your phone can die at home too. Nice to have it. Anyway, what program do I use and what does that process look like? So I'm scanning each of these stills individually using image capture. I'm scanning them at 600 DPI because that allows me to eventually possibly display this in 4K resolution, and I'd rather take like an extra few seconds per scan to have that than to have to rescan everything at a later date and time to up it to the resolution necessary. So I'd scan each of those, and then I've got in this case 49 images, And because I because I cut my teeth using Photoshop to make animated GIFs as a series of stills, that's where I will import things in initially. You can do a script load files into Stack, and it'll make a file that has all of them in layers going upwards. And from there, I'll do some like basic edits, make sure everything's aligned, because that's a lot easier to do frame by frame in Photoshop than it is to do the keyframes and positioning in After Effects or Premiere. And then from there, I might I'll export each of those as individual stills that have been edited a little bit, and then depending on where it's living, I might just save it as an animated GIF directly from Photoshop, or I might take those stills and import them as an image sequence into, I've been using Premiere a lot more. Since I was doing more editing of video that was not doing visual effects but just cutting video up and rearranging it. And then you can export from Premiere and save a video. Also Photoshop, if you're exporting video directly from Photoshop, it's pretty limited in what formats you can take and what control you have over the compression. Where if you use Premiere or After Effects, you can push it to Media Encoder, Adobe Media Encoder, and there you have a lot more nuance and variety in how you can handle those video files. Have you ever thought about selling those sort of small animated books with your animations? That would be so cool. I've thought about like what flip books could look like, but I would have to do a lot of practice and a lot of printing and a lot of binding. And the organization of getting that many stills in order from a printed something or other that's not manufactured is a lot of work, and I just haven't taken the time and put in the effort to really investigate how best to approach that. I would also have to print, spend money on printing in a different way than what I currently use, because the easiest way to print a lot of stills or a lot of black and white stuff is using laser printing. It's faster, and if you're just doing black and white, it ends up often being cheaper if you're printing a lot of black and white images. But because the toner is adhered to the paper with heat, and it's not ink that sinks into the fibers of the paper, it makes it so it's more likely to rub off of the surface, which can be advantageous if you're trying to do transfers or stuff like that. But in the case of flip books, where you'd have a lot of physical interaction and touching and moving and stuff, it's not the best. So I've thought about it, but I haven't invested the time, money, or effort to actually see how best to approach having a flip book. I don't think it would be bad. My animations are pretty well suited to it. It's pretty graphic. Hola in Mexico. almost done with scanning. Thanks for watching. Hope that you have a good afternoon, evening, morning. Not sure where you're at. But appreciate you watching and interacting. How did I start doing these kind of animations? How did I learn it? My first experience with animation was Macromedia Flash Player, or Macromedia Flash. Depending on how old you are, you might have interacted with it or not. Thank you, Luigi. But that was sort of my first experience with animating anything, and Flash does a lot of tweening. It's a different sort of learning process, but that's how I sort of started learning about animation and what it looks like, what it takes to work on animation. And I really enjoyed that. Did different things in different capacities. Started doing some frame-by-frame animation. But this more sort of specific style and methodology came about after trying to do some rotoscoping in college. Alright, let's add a 0 to this guy. Give me 1 second, I'll jump back on to talking through stuff. Copy this bit. Get info. Nope, I always do that. Rename these items. Paste that. Start at 1. Rename them. Copy these into the other folder. Rename this one to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 zeros. Open up Photoshop. Give it a moment and start script. Load files into stack. Browse. Go to the desktop. Live designs. December 1st. By name. Grab these. Start importing them and let you guys watch that here. Okay, so rotoscoping is a technique where you trace over the individual stills of either video or film to either like replicate or infer the motion from those stills. And so I wanted to do that, and I didn't have a tablet or anything. I just had a computer, and I started out trying using the trackpad to trace over those individual stills, but it took a long time and it wasn't very good. So I started just clipping paper onto my laptop screen and tracing the stills that way. That's how I got more familiar with using tracing paper and frame by frame sort of stuff. And I stuck pretty close to just doing rotoscoped work for a while and started doing a little bit of experimentation doing frame by frame animation, and I've since focused a bit more into doing non-referential animation. Yeah, so that's sort of the general process, and then kept at it and explored a little bit more here and there. Now I'm doing what I'm doing. Going off the flipbook idea, have you ever thought about the biggest project scale you could do for a potential project? Largest physical thing I did was a big live painting. That was like 8 foot by 15 feet wide or something. I've done things of similar-ish scale. Time-wise, the Fiona Apple thing is the longest single thing I've worked on. That wasn't using some sort of looping mechanism. Give it a minute. I mostly work with an analog process. Every now and again I'll use it for editing reference footage. But I usually don't use it as an animation specific program. Selective. 8. Yeah, let's save. Let's go into live designs. Tone. Give it a moment. Turn that off and drag this guy in here. Browse. Not that guy. I don't know how to decide. There you go. What is it? Want to say the movement flow smoothness you capture in your loops is mesmerizing. How important are those motion strokes? You might be referring to motion blur, but in animation it's usually referred to as animation smears, which is I don't know how to teach you to do this analog process using digital programs. Animation smears are sometimes necessary. It makes it have a different sort of fluidity of it. It makes it a little bit more cartoonish. Depends on what sort of animation you want to do, because this is stylistically it works for what I'm doing, but it might not work for yours. You can do something not terribly dissimilar if you use Photoshop and create a video layer. It's still gonna be like a big part of the appeal of the look of this is that every frame is different. You don't have anything that's really maintained from one frame to the next. So the fluidity of it, part of that is the fact that it's loose, that everything's got this little bit here and there. It's constantly moving, nothing stops. And the only way to really achieve that is to draw every single frame and allow for those inconsistencies between frames. But you can look up onion skinning in Photoshop and find tutorials for that, at least to like generally set it up. The marks that infer movement, you don't necessarily need them. It's still coming from that idea of motion blur, of animation smears. Animation smear is where you distort something. So like the same concept of having these multiple eyes and stuff like that is the same premise. Here's the best illustration I have. This guy. That's still, it's the same premise as having those motion lines. Those motion lines exist in, like if I'm doing this, you see those trails that happen because the frame rate and the shutter speed is such that when I move quickly, you have a residual image. And that's how you sort of see with your eye as well. Maybe not to the same degree, but you don't have that intuitively in animation. You have to fake it. You have to recreate this distorted image that's happening. And not all animation has that. There's a lot of different ways that you can approach doing motion blur interpreted into animation smears. Sometimes you have multiples, you have distortion, you have dry brush. What you're trying to do is avoid having something super jittery, like if you have something here, 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 but you're just going quickly from those things, you sort of have the starting point, the midpoint, and the end point. But if you were to have it just 1, 2, 3, it would have a stuttery effect to it. It would be 1, 2, 3 as opposed to a 1, 2, 3. You need to have the you gotta show the transition if you want something to look fluid in that way. But not all animation uses animation smears. It can make things look loose and a little bit squishy, which is what I want. But if you want something to look very solid and heavy and stuff like that, then you're less likely to use motion blur or use animation smears in that way. If you look at more actiony sort of work that might be at a lower frame rate, like anime and stuff like that, that's action fighting anime, you'll have a lot of things where it's multiples. So you'll have an image where you have like a punch up here and a punch down there and a punch over here, but it's all in the same still, and then it will adjust to be slightly varied positions on those. You're also more likely to have more angular animation smears, where instead of it being as loose and fluid as what I'm doing, as squishy, you'll have things where it's like a harsher edge to it, and it looks more like the edge of a sword or like a blocky sort of thing, where instead of having it be squishy, you have it more rigid, and that comes across in the motion interpretation. I don't know what's like. Oh. Any other questions with stuff? Sorry if I'm short or very quick with my responses for anyone who's asking for a specific tutorial, because I don't know what else I'd include in a tutorial that's not me in real time going through and doing everything. Because I'm like, that's what it is. That's the tutorial. It would just be maybe talking a little bit more through some elements of it. But this is as good a tutorial as anything that I would produce. It's just, you can start doing it. Don't know what materials you have available or where you're at with things. It's simple exercises. I'd started out with rotoscoping, so taking footage and tracing over it. If you are like familiar with animation in general, then I don't really know specific simple exercises. Animating shapes and forms, which is what so zero experience, rotoscoping is a pretty rewarding thing, and you can learn from it pretty well, which rotoscoping is taking, and you can work digitally a little bit more easily. You take video and you trace over every frame of it, or every other frame, depending on how fluid you want it to be. And that's a good way to find something that you like, trace every element of it, and get a very rewarding response from taking that and animating it. I think it's easiest to do it in Photoshop, but that's me. If you are working in After Effects, you can look for rotoscoping tutorials for that, and that's helpful in that way. Animating simple shapes is a good way to get practice. It's not as much fun and not quite as rewarding of an experience, but that's essentially what I'm doing here, just with added elements on top of it, and it's how professional animators have done animation for a long period of time. Is you get big motions, basic shapes, and then you refine. And because what you see in animation is usually the final product, that is something that looks somewhat intuitive and very fluid, but has a lot of detail and elements to it. It looks like the person just draws frame after frame after frame after frame, which is how I learned to do stuff, but it's not how people animate for like major motion pictures or TV shows and stuff. So that how they do that is they do big ideas, big motions, big elements, and then refine, and that's what it is. It's not doing immediate details. was the thing. What software do I use to rotoscope? A lot of the time I rotoscope directly onto paper, but otherwise I use Photoshop. And I'll have a video layer, and then I'll have a separate blank video layer that has onion skinning turned on, and I'll go that way. You would like an animation for your store/videos. How do you get a quote? Email me, traceloops@traceloops.com. Depending on the length and complexity, it will be like $700 plus. It's just how it has to go for the amount of time that I'm putting into it and the experience and such. And that's for pretty short. That's not like a minute-long video. I can't do that for that price. But if you send me an email, traceloops@traceloops.com, and you tell me a little bit more about what you're looking for, I can try to work with you and get some specifics in there. But I can't know anything until you tell me what you're looking for. Any other questions on stuff? I'll pose that. I'm going to eat this. And then I'll do my spiel in a second. I try to stream daily, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It varies as to how long the animations are. Thank you, Victor Press. So I try to stream daily at 3 p.m. New York time, Eastern Daylight Time. If I have enough time, like today, then you get like a full animation, and if I'm feeling up to it. Otherwise, it might be a still or a single thing. What was the other one? What do you like most, doing the animations or those red candy bars? I would prefer to animate, and but I just have them here. I had a big bag from a minute ago. All right, spiel time. So I'll be posting this as a time lapse and the video onto Instagram, TraceLoops Instagram there. You can watch it, interact with it there. If you want to watch the full recorded stream at a later point in time, you can go to YouTube, and I upload videos there after I stream them. And so this will be up within the next hour probably. But just search TraceLoops and it'll pop up. It should pop up. You might have to look for the specific animation or stream that you're looking for, but they all have dates on them. If you want to buy this design on a shirt, you can go to traceloops.com/store, and I should have this design up in the next hour or so. Those designs live for about 2 weeks on the site, and that's traceloops.com/store. If you live outside of the United States, then you can email me or direct message me, and I can work with you to get you a shirt or a design or whatever else that you're looking for that's in the store. It'll be a little bit pricier, usually around $5 more for most of the shirts, but then if it's international shipping for things that are a little bit older, or things that I personally have in my possession that I would be shipping out myself, price goes up by about $15 to $30 depending on where it's going and those bits. Not going to do the full A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H right now because that would kill my computer a bit. But I'll try to get that out at some point. If you want to follow me on TikTok, I'm there too. It's TraceLoops, and it's going to be the same stuff that you see here on Instagram, but a different place. So if you have any questions, throw them out. Otherwise, I'll be heading out in just a moment. The design of the shirts is all the frames. That's the best way that I know to put it on there, unless it's eventually it would maybe be having all the letters, but for the time being it's all the frames in a grid is what I typically do for animations. You don't have, it's the same stuff. It's not anything different. If you're trying to view it on TikTok, that's just me letting people know that I'm also on that platform. But it's no different than what you're going to be seeing here on Instagram, except because it's all full screen. Some of the animations just have white bars around them. That's the only real difference. And maybe a different song, because sometimes the song library is different for Instagram Reels and TikTok. But you don't have to follow there. That's just if you are already there and want to follow me, you can. Okay, well, I think that's everything. Thank you all for watching. Thanks, the original Sam. Appreciate it. I always feel weird saying what age I am, so I'm just gonna leave it as is. Plan on being back tomorrow, and it'll probably be an animation tomorrow as well. Yeah, so thanks. I'm heading out.